At some point during the 25 or so hours that I played Vampire Survivors, I stopped and asked myself, is this game actually fun? It's a bit of a thing to ponder, and ponder it I did for quite some time while I carried on playing. My wife has also been playing the game. In fact, she got into it even more than I did, fully completing the base game's collection and racking up well over twice my playtime, and she had a similar reaction. It became something that we chatted about every now and again, usually in the evenings when we'd be sitting together playing the game, her on her phone and me on my laptop. Now, that might seem like a deadly question to have to ask of a game. In ordinary circumstances, you'd be 100% right. After all, if you're having to think about whether a game is fun or not, odds are that you're thinking about how a game isn't being fun. But Vampire Survivors is built different. You're listening to the almighty Backlog. I'm Ellie, and today's review is on Vampire Survivors. Available for Android, iOS, macOS, PC, PlayStation 4 and 5, Switch, Xbox One and Xbox Series XS. Originally released in October of 2022, developed and published by Poncle. It's a roguelite shoot 'em up, and How Long to Beat has an average playtime of around 36 hours. I think the best way I could describe Vampire Survivors is that it's an action game for people who love spreadsheets. What do I mean by that? Well, in essence, and despite the hectic appearance, what Vampire Survivors is on a fundamental level is a numbers go up game. Everything you do, both in a run and outside, is in aid of achieving bigger numbers. You want to earn more gold, last more time, deal more damage, survive more hits. Other goals are secondary. The basic goal of a session of Vampire Survivors is right there in the title: survive. Well, I guess that's only half the title, but it's the only half that you're getting because despite the name, no vampires show up. Each run works in the same way. You get plonked down in a fairly vast arena armed with a single weapon, and then you must fight your way through increasingly dangerous hordes of monsters until either you die or the time limit elapses, and then you die. Your performance is tallied, you're presented with unlockable things, and then you're shunted back to the main menu. You pick yourself up, and you go again. Vampire Survivors is by no means a trendsetter in this field. There are definitely other similar kinds of games out there. The top-down view and sort of twin-sticky controls are reminiscent of things like Nuclear Throne, and of course the aesthetic is pure Castlevania, right down to the old-school fantasy horror art that adorns the menu screens. And yet, Vampire Survivors enjoys a level of popularity that far outstrips many of its competitors. The answer as to why lies in the sheer, mind-boggling level of depth and complexity lurking just beneath the surface of what is otherwise an initially unassuming game. Any given run starts by first selecting your character. While the beginning of the game only has a brief handful to pick from, as you hit unlock goals you'll quickly begin to earn the right to buy more of them. The base game alone has nearly 50, but since it's been supported by a raft of DLC, that has more than tripled. The character you pick affects your stats and starting weapon. The former can be small things like having more health or armour, or it can be things that feel more significant, such as having faster movement. The latter, however, is your first glimpse into one of Vampire Survivors' most expansive mechanics. Once you've picked your character and the stage you'd like to challenge, you get put down and let loose. Each character has the capacity for up to 6 weapons and 6 items, at least one of which is taken up by your starting option. The rest are filled out by defeating enemies and gathering enough experience to level up. One of the things that caught me a little unawares the first time I played it is that the game is actually an auto-firer. I thought it would be more of an active twin-stick shooter, just from the small amount of footage I'd seen. It becomes something you learn to actively plan around as you decide what weapons and items to take for your run. Understanding where each weapon's attacks are going to fall, how fast they occur, and in what way they contribute to your strengths or cover your weaknesses is vital to reaching the time limit on your chosen stage. It takes mere seconds from starting a stage before you're inundated with enemies. One thing that Vampire Survivors does ask of its players is that you really do need to be able to react and plan to the increasingly vast waves of enemies. Hesitation can lead to quite quick deaths in this game, as the amount of health and armour you have is rendered more or less moot when hundreds of monsters are falling on top of you all at once. It's also unforgiving, in that each stage has a set routine that it follows. Regardless of your level of preparation, as that timer marches on, the waves are going to happen until you either muddle through it or get murked. This means, though, that the game rewards repeat players, as you can begin to remember what's going to happen at what time, and when you can expect the more powerful waves or bosses to show up. Beating enemies awards you primarily with experience points, which you need to hoover up manually. As you hit thresholds, you'll level up, which increases specific stats per character, as well as giving you a choice of items to add to your loadout. One thing both me and my wife found as we played is that we gravitated towards specific weapons regardless of what character we were playing, which I suppose is both a strength and a weakness of the game. There's always the drive to experiment and try out different options, but it's also hard to argue against optimizing and picking what feel like the most efficient options, especially when a run can come to a swift end if you mess up. For example, both the Bible and garlic weapons were staples of our time with Vampire Survivors. Both are AoE that create a circle of damage around the character, with the former offering a higher damage per hit but a slower attack and longer cooldown, whereas the latter is a constant barrage of plinky damage that tears through weaker enemies with ease. It would be doing the game a great disservice to simply try and explain the absolutely ginormous bevy of weaponry available to you. Some are cool fantasy weapons like magic staves, while others are obvious references, such as the whip, holy water, cross axe and knives, all of which are drawn straight from Castlevania. Because there are so many, it's easy to find ones which do or do not work. For example, my wife was a big fan of the screen-killing pentagram and the random zaps of the lightning ring, whereas I preferred more controllable options like the Bayonetta-inspired bullet hell blasts of the twin pistols Fiera de Tupelo and 8 the Sparrow. Weapons also get to level up alongside you as well, though that's done by selecting them when given item options, so sometimes you have to choose between widening your arsenal or strengthening what you've already got. You also want to keep an eye out for bosses and mini-bosses, as they are not only concomitantly stronger than most mooks, but they also drop treasure chests. Cracking open a chest offers both substantial gold and additional level ups for your weapons and items, but more importantly, it's your only vector for something that functions as the first really transformative moment with any Vampire Survivors playthrough: evolution. In short, each weapon has an intrinsically paired item that, if you collect it and level up the weapon fully, unlocks the right for your weapon to evolve into a more powerful and occasionally quite functionally different form. Once you discover this, it becomes a game-changing mechanic. You start experimenting with weapon and item combinations, trying to find the ones that interact and unlock the new forms. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a noticeable rhyme or reason to which item works with which weapon, or if there is, I didn't figure that out, so it might be a bit frustrating to completionists to puzzle it out. Once you've landed on a combination, the game does have the good grace to remind you that they combine at least, so that's helpful for future runs. This is all probably a lot of fairly overwhelming detail, but I'm not done yet. The thing is, the goal of Vampire Survivors isn't just to make it through a run. For a start, stages often have hidden collectibles to find stuffed into the far corners of the levels. These are harder to get than you'd think, because actually making tracks and keeping up with leveling your weapons and character is tricky. Some stages have bonus characters to find or secret weapons to try, and often you're not just surviving but actively working towards one of the in-game achievements, because that in turn unlocks new content. Once you've beaten a run, you tot up your cash, which you need to in order to buy the new characters you've unlocked or pay to improve stats for future runs. There are also a ton of bonus stages to find and play, some of which are really bizarre. The one that comes to mind for me here is The Coop, which features waves of murderous chickens. It's also a game where, paradoxically, runs can feel like you're dawdling and spending a lot of downtime during gameplay. The thing is, once you've got a bit of a grasp on the game mechanics and you've figured out a few weapon item combos that result in decent upgrades, the game kind of settles into playing itself. This is especially true if you're just shooting for goals like hitting level 50 with a character or surviving for a certain amount of time in a specific level. It can genuinely get, dare I say, boring, but like in a satisfying way, if that makes sense. I think if you've played the game at all, you probably know what I mean. Like, at some point in a run, you reach a bit where you've fully upgraded everything and you're just sitting there, watching the screen blare and flash like a midnight rave, not touching anything as enemies collapse into heaps around you and the scene is covered with absurdly high numbers at a rate of hundreds per second. It's almost zen-like. And that is why I say it's an action game for people who like spreadsheets. It's a game about action-packed data validation, in that you're going down a checklist of stuff you're actually trying to get and absent-mindedly blowing away hordes of monsters with your offhands. It's immensely compelling, while also being weirdly mind-numbing. It makes Vampire Survivors a perfect time killer or podcast game, but it also has enough depth to make it worth your time to dig into. Just, probably don't get it on your phone or you'll be stuck glued to the screen well into the night. The final score is 6 out of 7. Excellent. Games with a touch of brilliance. It might only just miss out on being a favourite, but you should definitely play this. This has been Ellie on the Almighty Backlog. You can support this project by reading the review over on thealmightybacklog.wordpress.com or by listening to the pod review hosted on YouTube and RSS. Please feel free to follow me over on Mastodon, Blue Sky and/or Backlogged by following the links on the website. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can do so by donating via PayPal to thealmightybacklog@gmail.com or by hitting the donate button on the blog. Thank you for listening and have a lovely day.